Our study today is coming out of volume 10, number 38, Beloved Saint Germain, dated September the 17th, 1967. And our beloved Saint Germain title is Know God, Know Thyself, Know the Law of Thy Being. And as we are being asked to know God, we read in chapter 46 of the book of Psalms, he tells us to be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nation. I will be exalted in the earth. As we listen to the Almighty's word that he shares with us in this hour, to exalt God is to raise him to the highest place in our lives, to give him first place in our thoughts and in our minds, and every word that is spoken upon this planet. Because all of thy light is coming forth through the Almighty. And as the Almighty asks us to know thyself, when we know ourselves, we know that in Genesis, that God had told us that he had made us in the image and likeness of himself. And in doing so, he gave us the gifts to be able to go out and do the work that we needed to do. In 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9 tells of the spiritual gifts that the Father has given us in order for us to start this work. He gave us the wisdom. He gave us knowledge. He gave us faith and the gift of healing. And he gave us also the working of miracles. And also one of the key things that we'll be looking at today is prophecy. And to another one, he gave the discerning of the spirit, and another, the different kinds of tongue, and to another, the interpretation of tongues. Although the Father has given us these gifts to work with, we still have to know what it is that the Father wants us to do. We have to be able to listen to our hearts as God speaks to us each and every day. I'll be the first one to tell you that I lag behind sometime on what it is that I receive and act upon from God, because we want to make sure of what it is that the Father is asking us to do. But through his guidance, we know that if we follow his words, we can't go wrong. But I would know without a shadow of a doubt that he wants to make sure that we understand that it is he that is speaking. And as our beloved Saint Germain has said, has said in introducing this pearl, they have been asked to define prophecy. And all throughout this teaching, that will be one of the things that we're listening to, is the prophecy, which is the inspired utterance that God gives us in order to put forth the teaching. In 1 John chapter 2, verse 3, it tells us that we know him if we keep the commandments of God, because God has given us the commandments of what it is that we have to do. And some of the one, which is one of the key one, is love thy neighbor as thyself. Because if you love yourself, you're going to move forward on that, and you're going to love your neighbor, and for that guidance that you're getting from the Almighty. As we move forward into the teaching, Saint Germain tells us that those who lack Discrimination are torn between the desires to believe all things and plagued by honest doubt. Yet they yearn for clarification from heavenly places. So when we think about the discrimination, we're trying to figure out what's happening. They're trying to discriminate between the two different voices in order to know which one is the Almighty that's speaking to them. So yes, I can understand the desires to believe all things and yet have honest doubt and yet yearn for clarification from the heavenly places, because we want to know from the heavenly places who is speaking to us. Is it God that's guiding us, or one of the masters that we're following that's guiding us at this time? As Saint Germain goes on and say, remember that all of the sacred books that have ever been written, all of the knowledge that is esteemed by the many religions of the world, regardless of the claim of men to the contrary, have come into manifestation through the individual who were embodied upon this planet. In other words, they have all come forth through man. So whatever teaching that they're receiving, whatever prophecy that they are receiving, it's all coming forth through God that's given it to us, that we're able to pass it on and continue to work with the Almighty, that we're able to keep it in line. As our beloved Lunello was able to share forth the wisdom of this pearl from beloved Saint Germain back in 1967, that guidance that he was able to pencil in, so that as we receive this teaching this day, and we'll find out as we go on into the teaching that the Master Saint Germain has said that not only did they, as far as give the teaching, but they have passed it on not only to you and I, but to the world as a whole, so that this teaching is able to get out and get around and be in more hands than just a few. And so that's the reason that we're supposed to be able to walk and talk the talk that the Masters has given us for guidance. Some of us are not going to sound like the rest of us, but that guidance is going to always be there, because the truth of the teaching is the key thing that the Masters want you to get out. And as it goes on to say, there is and has always been a tendency on the part of mankind to judge the accuracy and the quality of spiritual material by the lives of those through whom the material came. Saint Germain have said that men should not spend as much time as they do in the examination room, examining the mortal minds and measures of the lives of the person of the spiritual teachers, but they should be more into being in tune with what it is that the teaching is giving them and where it is allowing them to go. Saint Germain have said that thirsty travelers ought not to spurn a cup of cold water simply because of the tin cup in which it is delivered has imperfection. And that kind of goes to say that we're going to have some imperfection in what it is that we are doing, but don't stand, don't, in other words, throw out the message that you're receiving because you don't agree with what it is that the person looks like or what it is that they are saying. If the world of an individual is old, then every individual on earth is old. In the sense that myriad experiences have created an encrusted concept, which is difficult for men to relinquish. So if you think of an encrusted concept, it means that it's been covered over a little bit, and sometimes it don't sound like what it is that it should be. But if it's the true teaching, then it should be straight from God. And thus in the olden times, even the present hour, men do examine the source of information rather than the teaching. And it is, blessed one, that the teaching, after all, that is everything. That which bears the earmark of cosmic authenticity registers within the chords of the heart. But how shall this be manifested in those whose attunement with their own hearts is sadly lacking, where the brilliantness of the mind can analyze only the word structure of our releases? So what the Masters is saying is that if it's not in your heart and you only doing it from the words, how can you pass it along? Because whatever it is that you're doing, it should be from the heart. How do we raise our children? We don't have a book for that, but we raise them from the heart and the love that the Almighty gives us. He has given us the laws within our hearts. So that's what it is that we have to draw from. When there's the sounding board, where then is the sounding board for authenticity? So if you don't have that authenticity in your heart, where is the sounding board going to come from, is what he's asking. It says men should understand that they themselves need perfection, as well as attunement with a higher power, if they are to register the genuine perfection which they profess to seek. You see, frequently seekers for light maintain a very unprofessional attitude in their examination of the various teaching they encounter. But after all, they lack experience in what it is that they seek. Therefore, there's almost a blind struggle that occurs in the world of individuals on the path toward the light. If you are not in tune with the higher power of your Holy Christ self, you will not receive the instruction that God has given. So then, where's the sounding board that you need? You still have to go back to your heart, where all the laws of God is written. Is it any wonder then that they are easily victims by those blind leaders of the blind, who have themselves not attained what we call 1 iota of God realization? So if they're not understanding who God is and where the words are coming from, how can they give you the true meaning of what it is that they're looking for? So when you think about the blind leading the blind, we've always heard that they fall in the ditch. So in other words, that means you got to dig yourself up and get back out and get back on the path again to straighten things out. And Saint Germain goes on to say, these are they who have studied all about the miraculous manifestation of the lives of the saints, yet who have permitted their brains to register, together with a more perfect admonishment, the famous ideas or moral concepts of their compeers for their brothers and for one another. So if the leaders themselves are not in tune with their Holy Christ self and they have no God realization, how can they lead anyone successfully? These are the questions that we end up asking ourselves. Heaven is not disdainful of honest men who search for truth, but we know that people are prone to be overly critical of those whose simplest thoughts they cannot yet understand. Humans' sophistry and wit do not of themselves produce a passport that leads to a higher dimension of accurate perception. On the contrary, many have excommunicated themselves from a movement of definite spiritual progress before they could take root or refuge in an onward moving company of spiritual devotees. So the masters are saying is that not because of the contempt and the deception of men, we have to know that men will sometimes deceive you, which we read and studied about it in the Bible of God, when he was talking about the old prophet, how he deceived the other prophet and caused him to lose his life. So just know that even if they are the children of God, sometimes you can be deceived by the person that's bringing you the message. Surely this must pinpoint the receptive, how very vital it is that man should be as little children, trusting in the infinite one and in the wisdom of heaven itself to perform judgment upon men whose hypocrisy they eschew. There's no need, blessed one, for men to be constantly engaged in a witch hunt while they yet seek to find their way back home. Again and again, individuals steeped in tradition or in traditional concept attends one of our service only to turn away from the great opportunity which is given them. For where the door can be opened toward the light of valid explanation given, they have decided in their minds that the appearance of those who represent us or the expression of their mouth are not pleasing to them. So arbiters of their own confusion, they'll land hold upon decaying substance and proclaiming it as real while turning away from the real or the banner of freedom without ever knowing what is the true value it is. So if you're being your own arbiter, how can you settle the dispute if you don't understand the teaching? So the light and the explanation that is given, where the open door of God is pouring forth that wisdom, that as you walk into the teaching and they are able to give you that knowledge, it's the same as going into a classroom and they have that wisdom that they have studied for all of those years to be able to raise you up in your consciousness. There's also that consciousness of God that is standing by waiting to fill you. If there is then any admonishment that I would give to humanity in these troubled times, it is this. Saint Germain says, be not hasty of judgment. I admit that some things are self-evident and cast their shadows before them. But truth is often subtlety concealed beneath a crude exterior or a manifestation that belies its great content. The lives of the saints and the great men of old, as well as those contemporary of men of spiritual grandeur, are not always easily characterized. You can't put everyone in the same category. You never know which one or who the teaching is going to appeal to. I know when we first got into teaching, there was a lot of work that had to be done in order for us to move forward. Brother Scott and myself, we used to go to the service in the city of Chicago. Here we went to like 2 services. We went to the teaching of the Summit Lighthouse at 10 o'clock, and then at 2 o'clock we went to the I Am Temple that was studying on the south side in order to be able to understand and know the teaching. We wanted to be broaden a broad mind of how and what the work was all about that we was getting into. So as we moved back and forth, Sundays for years, we wanted to know what the teaching was all about. And it goes on to say some people come to our abode or they contact one or more of our chelas, and they sometimes reject both the teacher and the teaching because these do not fit the stereotype pattern of the seekers. Yet how many seekers for greater knowledge today are manifest tokens of the Father's love in the world of form? How many do openly raise the dead or perform miracles of healing? How many know the sacred initiatic mysteries and can without fail operate within the framework of a magnificent cosmic law? Saint Germain says, how many? He wants to know the number. So we have to be working on this so that we can be counted in that number, to be able to do all of these things that we read about early on in the Bible, that God has given us these gifts to do. Not only the healing, the wisdom, and the teaching, but the faith and the guidance that God has given us to start off with. He told us what it was that he had given us. He shared with us in the Bible through the different prophets and the prophecy of which way things were to come. And Saint Germain goes on to say, I've seen the sophistry and human pride. I have witnessed the arrogance in kingly places throughout Europe and the Far East. I've aided George Washington in the early days of American Revolution, and I've stood guard over America in the best of my abilities since that day. I have amplified the flames and wind of freedom everywhere, seeking to sustain and establish orders and rules by law, that men may experience the freedom that order and law brings. Yet again and again, pride and prejudice have won the field, and the echelons of honor has deflected the errors of the unrighteous, only to see the leaders slain by the calumny, the false, and the defamatory. Defamatory statement as far as the viciousness of sinful men. In the day and age, we have entrusted the teaching to no one man, but we have given finite portion of the infinite segment of reality to the planet as a cipher, which is the heart. So, in other words, everything has been coded to where that only the heart is able to bring that forth and declare it, and that you're only able to can readily decipher it. It tells us that in the Pearl of Wisdom, the Keeper of the Flame lesson and other expression, which comprise the teaching of the Summit Lighthouse, we have sought to integrate the wholeness of all genuine upliftment movement that have ever existed upon the planet. So as we are being told and know that the message is being given, it has been coded. So the heart is the only thing that really shares in and gives us that direction. That is the only way that we can uncode it. But just remember, we're not the only one that's receiving this teaching. The masters have made sure that this teaching is being spread abroad so that each and every one, that they can get the word out. Even in the presence, we have made what amounts to preparatory revelation. We have revealed by our glyphs or forms of expression, blessed keys of the freedom of a man. But no amount of revelation or truth can bring the heart of heaven the assurance that the hearer will accept and heed or do the work of the teacher. Each noble cosmic effort made on behalf of mankind is always energy fraught with the possibilities of rejection. So the Masters is telling us it makes no difference who is receiving it. Not only us, but we know that a lot of time the teaching sometime fall on fertile ground and it grows. Sometime it falls on ground that's not too fertile and it does not give forth fruit. So the masters are reaching out to make sure that they're able to do that. The unpredictability of man's character through his continual immersion in a sense of sin and the sinfulness as the nefarious plan of the hordes of darkness does not make him a conscious candidate for heaven's ministration. Rather is he's often chiding. Again and again, he is adrift upon the restless seas of his own uncontrolled energies. So we know that What the master is saying is that man is unpredictable because they don't know which way they're going to receive it. Saint Germain tells us that because of our unpredictable character, through our continual immersion of sin, it makes us not a conscious candidate for heaven. We often have to be rebuked in order to get us back on the path and telling us which way it is that we need to go. These energies raise as a blind instant of struggle, while the search for the crown of heaven goes on with the soul. Within the soul, he continually resists his own good by the weight of his criticism, condemnation, and judgment. The very hand that seeks to feed him the heavenly manna are examined with distrust, and the fruits of wrong striving is always the ashes of his error. How many times have we sought some pathway into the souls, into the hearts, into the person of a man, that we might restore the boundaries of the old temple of the Son of God, the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. The magnificence of the cosmic Christ is God's gift to every man, culminating in the life of Jesus 2,000 years ago. This manifest example of divine grace by the power of holy law sought to give mankind the fullness of grace as an adjunct to the law that would supersede in the part of the ancient Mosaic code. He sought to expand greater light in the world through the kingdom of Christ in order to make the world safe for the manifestation of God. So God has given us that opportunity that we're able to get out and do the teaching. He has told us that we would be able to reach more people than him. He has given us that opportunity, as Saint Germain is telling us through the teaching that the masters are giving, reaching it out and sending it to the more and more masses in order to raise them up and to give them what it is that they need. But the communist hordes came, and the fertile brain of Karl Marx expounded. The philosophy of the damned that would ignore cosmic law. The law of recompense that justly conveys to each life stream the fruit of their own labor. Thus men sought to legislate against heaven and to provide in the world a form of social salvation, housing for bodies, food for bodies, dialectical materialism for minds, side by side with invectiveness, mal-designed, and social unrest, which were intended to destroy the matrix of the invisible world, to destroy man's right to spiritual freedom, to force him into the smothering state wherein the social order would take complete dominion over his life. Instead of being rid of this blight, the world today is even more steeped in it. The dogma of communism have invaded the churches as the power of darkness have sought to spread a web of confusion over the minds of men, and thus in the name of brotherhood to deprive them of their freedom. The cooperation of individuals in high places with the forces of darkness have imposed upon mankind today in the bookstall of the world and in the theaters, in the places of learning through communication media of televisions and radio. The strange semantics of those who seek the control of minds of men for whatever partial reality they deem worthy of their energies. Thus the voices of the damned proclaim a false freedom, and the innocent together with the guilty become carrion abominators, denying the Christ. denying the light of the world, denying peace and goodwill to men. The warlords of the world, united with the financial interests, have made merchandise of true culture. The teaching of the great men of letter, of prophet or ministerial, of the spirit, of the great musician of old, of great painters, of sculptures in the state of decay. For the world has entered the madness of the spoilers and the sensuality of the purveyors of enervating and senseless thrill to the heart of men. In the book of Revelation, allusion is made to the fact that the stinger are in their tails. And veritably in the tails of men is the lower order of their consciousness, have forces sought to bring down this nation as fallen Pompeii. Freedom and democracy are less enshrined as the days pass, and the High Court decision of the United States have defrauded men of the necessary protection of law and order in the land where men are not yet trained withal to understand the law of karma, and they are indeed their brother's keeper. Now then, with all of this destructive manifestation of the result decision made by the lords of karma, we say to every son of heaven, to everyone who loves freedom, who desires to see it sustained either in its own personal world or in the world of men, now is the time to lull indolently. Now is not the time to lull indolently, and to say, so what? Or what can I do about it? Now is the hour of reckoning, when men must come to their plight, their faith in the purpose of Almighty God, regardless of the world madness. So it makes no difference what's going on. God has given us that opportunity, and the masters want to know, what are we going to do? Are we going to just stand idly by, or are we going to go to work? Are we going to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps? And it says, take no example from the decadent. Pursue not with them the same riot to destruction. Set your courses by the star, by the light of your presence, by the compassion of the Christ, by recognition of the seamless garment of universality, by the sinless state that hold to the proclamation of God that life is good and beautiful. Be a rock of ages, be immovable in Christ. Abound with the joy of air that always rests in faith in godly ideals. Lot joyed not in the doing of the men of Sodom. Therefore you need not rejoice in the doing of men, nor should you be moved by them, but remain steadfast and immovable to the perfection of your presence. We know that in Genesis chapter 1, Genesis chapter 19, verse 1 through 29, it tells of the angels that came to visit Lot before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. When the angels came and Lot was sitting in his doorway, I'm kind of paraphrasing here a little bit, but he was sitting in his doorway and he saw the angels, and he invited them in, and they says no, they will go into town and do what they had to do. And Lot told him, says no, says you all need to come in, and he would feed them. So they agreed to come in because Lot knew the custom and the type men that was in his town. He knew what would happen to the angels if he allowed them to go into town among these people. And sure enough, while they was in Lot's home, Lot saw the people. They came and they was gathering outside, and they wanted Lot to let the angels come out so that they could get to know them. And Lot told him, says no, says I have two daughters that have not known men, says I will give you them. And they says no, they wanted the two angels that had come in. So as Lot was backing up next to the door, the angel snatched Lot in to save him from the mob of destruction that was outside his door. So as Lot was being pulled in, the angels caused the men to be blinded. So they wasn't able to find the door in order to be able to get in. So in not being able to get in, knowing where they was going, they finally left. So that next day, that night and the next day, the angels told Lot, says, you know what, he asked him, says, about his people that he had there. And he told him, says, yeah. And he said, well, you need to get your people and get out of this town because God is going to destroy it. And Lot told his son-in-laws about it, and they thought he was joking, and they didn't pay that much attention. So that next morning, the angels got Lot and his family up with the children and wife and got them out of there. And that was the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. So the one thing that we have to know that through that teaching, we can't sit around and not be a rock of ages. We can't be immovable. We have to be able to do the work that God has sent us here to do. We have to have better understanding and wisdom in order to move forward. And Saint Germain goes on to tell us that the test that they said would come has come. Even if they worsen, the power of the heaven is able to summon the invincible. God victorious on a flame that precedes the manifestation of cosmic purpose, because it sustains cosmic purpose in the mind and the heart. The light of God never fails, and therefore the great white brotherhood will continue to espouse those ideals for mankind, which in moment of weakness they cannot express for themselves. The tendency of the part of humanity to mimic one another has lowered the standards of conduct, as the infection of sensual disorder and carelessness in dress reduces the hope of man for heaven in this age. So the one thing that we know that humanity does mimic what it sees. We know that based on all of the children that we have out in the world nowadays, it used to be when everything wasn't so broad, and I can remember growing up that when I was growing up, we didn't have a TV in order to see all the things that was going on over in Asia or Africa or the different towns. So, you had more of a custom life. But now everything is so broad that whatever is happening over there yesterday is going to be happening here in a few minutes. The one thing that we look at is that the first thing that you hear of is of all the murders. You hear of all of the carjacking. I mean, you have children now as young as 15 years old that's mimicking what they see on TV. They're going around carjacking people at service station or wherever, even by their homes or wherever it is that they are doing business. So all of this stuff is being mimicked worldwide because of what it is that TV allows them to see. So whatever it is that children see, they sometimes mimic it. All depends on what their guidance is that they're receiving at home. Are they receiving that love and the guidance that God is giving them, that the parents should be administering to them? That is the raising up that the Almighty wished for them to do. As we move forward in the teaching, our beloved Saint Germain asked, what need have they for heaven? Are they not in communion with the sensuality which they crave, which seek of depravity? They know not of, but in which they are content, or unperceivers' error. When it is too late, they will glimpse it. I've often heard people tell me as they grow older, and some of the ones that you end up counseling well, I shouldn't say you, but that I end up counseling and talking to that have gotten locked up, that call me and you counsel them and they say like, well, they're very sorry for what it is that they've done that got them in this place. But the time of it is now is that you're waking up, and it's kind of late, but it's better late than never that you're able to see and be able to turn your life around, because God wants to welcome you back with open arms. But we know that that is one of the things that happen. But we are concerned for those who are able to see it and shine it today, who are reaching out and up for the energy that can yet save the age, that can yet deliver the world. Not by an individual messianic concept do we seek to heal the breach, but by the recognition that many sons of light serving together as invokers of the cosmic presence, serving with hierarchy and with the karmic board, can yet put a finger in the dike of the world karma and produce a spiritual renaissance through the teaching, which must be carefully formed and preserved, exhibit in proper setting, and extended as a chalice of hope to a waiting world. Note, we have to be able to do this together. As the masters are asking us, this is the reason that Saint Germain has shared this teaching all the way back from 1967, is as prevalent today as has ever been needed. Saint Germain goes on to say the sunlight of God's love is the sunlight of God's freedom. Into the dimensionless, limitless world of spirit, man must come, bearing in the hand of the cup of his desire for God's wonderful revelation, for God's wonderful work to be made known unto him. There is so much that is hidden, waiting to be revealed, that we can scarcely contain ourselves as we work under higher guidance to raise the consciousness of the aspirant toward the light and away from the shadows that have sought to impose upon him. It is altogether just that you have been raised into the perception of the light and to shun the darkness. And thus have I lengthened this epistle in the hope that greater perception might come to those whom we love so dearly. So as we give thanks to our beloved Saint Germain for his guidance and his direction, for his light and his wisdom, that he has started walking toward us back in 1967, that we are able to receive that guidance this day, that we are able to reach out and stand with thee, the Almighty God, that's within each and every one's heart flame. We ask for thy blessing, O Father, this day as we go forth.